Welcome to the Aaron Cohen Show. Before we dive in, I just want to give a special shout out to our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by the Cherry's Deep Concealment Holster. Cherry's Multi-Fit Deep Concealment Holster, same holster I trained Keanu on for the John Wick franchise. Super comfortable, very, very concealable, below the waistband system. Zero digging into your gut, allows you to wear that thing all day super comfortably. And a lightning fast draw with just a little bit of training. And this thing just won't fall off you. If you're one of those grapplers, you're a BJJ guy and you carry concealed, you may want to have a look at this holster because of where it rides. It's below the waistband. So if you need to go hands-on in a physical confrontation and you don't want that weapon coming out or especially falling off you, check out the Cherry's Deep Concealment Holster. Hit the link in the description. Go to cherriescounterterror.com and use the discount code Cohen Show, and we'll get you hooked up. Today I'm diving into one of the most daring hostage rescue missions ever executed, known as Operation Thunderbolt, also known as the Entebbe Raid. Later it was named Miftzah Yonatan, or Operation Yonatan. And to understand the significance of this mission, I've got to set the table or set the scene here for you. In the 1970s, it was a very intense time globally. There was a lot of tension. A lot of hijackings were becoming very common as a tactic for terrorists. And the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was at the heart of many of these incidents. It was a world at that time. There was a lot of fear when it came to traveling abroad in the 70s. It was just more risky because of the airline hijackings had become more common. But Operation Thunderbolt wasn't just about a rescue. It was a very serious, defining moment for Israel. And it showed an incredible, unwavering commitment to, at the time, that young state being able to protect its citizens at any cost. And that mission inspired a generation of IDF future special ops vets, including myself, and continues to influence modern day tier 1 hostage rescue tactics. So strap yourselves in for this one. It's an incredible story about courage, about really, really hard decision making, and the price that Israel has to pay in order to have that Jewish state. June 27th, 1976. Air France, June 27, 1976, Air France Flight 139 takes off from Tel Aviv bound for Paris with a stopover in Athens. Athens airport had notoriously lax security, making it a prime target for terrorists. Sure enough, 4 armed hijackers managed to board that flight. 2 Germans from the revolutionary cells, the Bader Meinhof group, and that was Wilfried Bose and Bridget Kuhlmann, and 2 operatives from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or the PFLP, which is a designated terrorist organization. These aren't amateurs. These are hardened, extreme militants, and they've got one goal in mind, and that's to strike at the heart of Israel. So shortly after takeoff from Athens, the terrorists make their move. They brandish pistols and hand grenades, end up storming the cockpit and taking control of the aircraft. The pilots and the passengers are forced into submission immediately. Remember, there's no security on El Al at this time, on this airline at this time, or any airline for that matter. And the demands are the release of 53 prisoners, most of whom are terrorists held in Israel and other countries. And if their demands are met, they swear to execute all of the hostages, starting with the Israelis. So just take a second there and imagine the terror inside this plane. Families, children, elderly passengers, all of them are suddenly plunged into this nightmare. The hijackers don't just want to make a statement here. They're out for blood. And the plane is ultimately diverted to Benghazi, Libya for refueling before heading to its final destination, Entebbe, Uganda. And this is where the real nightmare begins. Let me start off by talking about the Entebbe airport. This is no ordinary airstrip. And at the time, it's now under control of one of the world's most brutal dictators. Give him a little Google. His name was Idi Amin. He was a former ally to Israel, and he had turned against Israel and embraced radical Palestinian causes. His army of Ugandan soldiers are the ones providing security for the terrorists, transforming the airport into a terror fortress. The terrorists waste no time in showing their true colors. They end up separating the Israelis and the Jewish passengers from the non-Jewish ones. An absolute harrowing echo from the Nazi era. And the non-Jewish hostages are released and flown back to Europe, but 106 hostages remain. And they're crammed into the old terminal building, surrounded by gunmen under constant threat of death. Survivors of the Entebbe raid would later describe the conditions, just to give you a little bit of color. The heat, the lack of food and water, and a ton of psychological torment. Living in constant fear as the terrorists patrol the terminal with weapons. While Idi Amin himself, again, who was once an ally to Israel, even wore Israeli paratrooper wings, occasionally appeared to offer false reassurances. He would talk to the hostages. And so they were caught in this nightmare, praying for a miracle. And so back in Israel, the government is in a state of crisis. And then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Defense Minister Shimon Peretz are grappling with an impossible decision. Remember, this is very new. This has never happened before at this type of scale. And should they negotiate, they're risking the lives of hundreds of Israelis by setting a dangerous precedent. So the question then becomes, should they attempt some type of audacious rescue operation thousands of miles away with no guarantee of success? And the Israeli cabinet at the time is very divided. Rabin is tormented by the responsibility on his shoulders. It's an absolute monster. He knows that a failed rescue attempt could mean the death of every hostage. Peres, however, pushes for a military solution. Intelligence reports from the ground provided some hope, and information about the terrorists' routines, the layout of the terminal, and the presence of the Ugandan soldiers. But the clock is ticking, and the terrorist deadline is getting closer. This all happens within a couple of days. I think it's about a week total. So finally, the decision is made, and Israel will act. And this isn't just about saving hostages. It's about doing what Israel does when it comes to terrorism, which is about sending a message that Israel will not bow to terror. But planning a rescue mission of this scale in just a few days, it felt like a nearly impossible task. And so this is where Israel's famed Mossad comes in, or the Misrad Latafkidim Meuchadim, the Institute for Special Tasks and Intelligence. Israel's legendary intelligence agency, which you guys have been following over the last year in response to October 7th. They end up launching a massive operation to gather every piece of intel possible. Mossad agents interview released hostages who describe the positions of the terrorists, the patterns, the different activity, the layout of the terminal, and even the morale of the Ugandan soldiers. And so Mossad also ends up consulting with the architect who helped design the Entebbe airport and actually helped put together the plans for it, including the old terminal. They end up digging up the blueprints and information about the structural weaknesses and suggestions on the best way to approach the building and breach the building is needed. And so every piece of data at this point is crucial. The operation just can't be bold. It's got to be flawless, especially when it comes to hostage rescue. Failure isn't an option. And for every second wasted, the moment that element of surprise is lost, another innocent hostage gets killed. So these operations need to be executed extremely fast, and the shots need to be straight, and it's got to be flawless. So the IDF puts together a plan involving 4 C-130 Hercules aircraft, which will fly low across Africa, evading radar detection, and land at Entebbe under the cover of night. And on board are 100 elite commandos from Israel's Sayeret Matkal, or General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, which you've heard me speaking to over the last year. This is Israel's premier Tier 1 Spec Ops unit. And these guys are trained for missions for this type of surgical precision hostage rescue is their bread and butter. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a veteran of Sayeret Matkal and many other leaders in Israel. And so the plan includes a decoy, a black Mercedes, identical to Idi Amin's official car, and the commandos will drive the vehicle up to the terminal, hoping to confuse the Ugandan guards who are protecting the airport. And the mission has to be executed with lightning speed. Get in, eliminate the terrorists as quickly as possible, free the hostages, and destroy the Ugandan MiG fighter jets that are at the airport to ensure that the team can get away with the hostages and escape quickly. And so this isn't just a typical military mission. This thing is a race against time. And every second counts at this point. And the commandos end up rehearsing the operation tirelessly for days, running through every plausible scenario imaginable. This one's a one-shot deal. If they fail, there will not be a second chance. And this is what Spec Ops units in Israel do. My unit does this, the Mistaravim, when they're doing a high-threat arrest. And then obviously our Yamam and Matkal when they're dealing specifically with hostage rescue. So on July 3rd, 1976, C-130s take off from Israel, flying low over the African desert. The commandos inside are completely silent. Some of them are throwing up because of the turbulence, checking their weapons, running through assignments over and over and over again. Some of them, obviously, thinking about the repercussions of this operation. And the hostages that they're about to go after. The tension, from what I heard in those C-130s, is palpable. You can taste it. The pilots navigate in complete radio silence, hugging the terrain to avoid any detection. The flight is long, and every minute, feels like an hour. Again, some of these guys are throwing up in the craft or in the aircraft. Again, not just about completing a mission, it's about also returning home alive to their families. So there's a lot at stake here. At 11 p.m., the C-130s touch down at Entebbe. The rear ramps drop, and out come the Mercedes and the Land Rovers. And these vehicles drive towards the terminal, and for a moment, it looks like this might work. The Ugandan guard hesitates, thinking it's Idi Amin or one of his high-ranking officials. But then one of the guard realizes something is off. He raises his weapon, and that's when the commandos strike. And at that point, the operation is on, and they begin moving as quickly as possible, storming the terminal and racing towards it within seconds. At that point, the element of surprise is gone. But this is where Sayeret Matkal's training kicks in at that exact moment. They end up making entry, getting into a pretty brutal, chaotic firefight, and end up neutralizing all 4 terrorists. Real quick, though, before I continue, I just want to thank you guys for watching this special episode. And if you're interested in this stuff and you enjoy the show and you want to support it, and help me keep bringing these stories and analysis out, do me a favor, grab yourself one of those sponsorship packages, hit the description in this video down below, and become a supporter of the show. They start at about $25, and this helps keep us going. So the commandos end up bursting into the terminal, and they're shouting in Hebrew to identify hostages and terrorists. The terrorists barely have any time to react. and within minutes are neutralized. But the mission isn't without a loss. The unit commander, the mission commander, Lieutenant Colonel Yoni Netanyahu, who's a revered commander in this unit, he was a legend, ends up getting hit by a stray Ugandan sniper's bullet and ends up dying from his wounds. And his loss is a devastating blow. But the commandos can't stop. They've got to complete the mission. So they end up securing the hostages, many of whom are still in shock. Many of them are elders, too stunned to move. Meanwhile, another team ends up blowing up the Ugandan MiG fighter jets that are on the tarmac, assuring that there's no chance of any aerial pursuit following the extraction. It's a brilliant tactical move that really helps with securing their escape. And the hostages, they're finally free, and they're brought back to Israel. But the chaos isn't over. On that way to the aircraft, some of them end up collapsing from exhaustion. Others end up clinging on to the Sayeret Matkal rescuers in relief. Outside, Ugandan soldiers ended up opening fire. That's what led to the round that ends up hitting Yoni Netanyahu. And the commandos respond very efficiently, very deadly, with a ton of accuracy, end up putting down all of those who were shooting at the commandos. They end up loading the hostages onto the C-130s, covering each other in a pretty coordinated retreat. And then the aircraft takes off, heading back to Israel. And at that point, it's a moment of triumph, but also a very, very sad loss. 3 hostages end up dying, and Yoni Netanyahu's sacrifice weighs very heavily on everybody, particularly the fighters in the unit. But 102 hostages' lives have been saved, and at that point, it's a near miracle. When the C-130s land in Israel, the nation erupts in celebration. Headlines were everywhere on this rescue. Families are reunited, and the tears of relief and joy are felt throughout the country. But the mourning for Yoni Netanyahu's death leaves a very deep scar on Israel and on Sayeret Matkal and his teammates. And his legacy becomes a symbol of courage and selflessness. And a ton of books have been written about it. And Yoni Netanyahu really becomes a national treasure for the state of Israel to this day. And the mission, when it hits the papers, ends up sending shockwaves around the world. Israel has shown that it will go to extraordinary lengths to protect its people. And the operation ends up getting studied by militaries and tactical units globally for the next 30 years, setting a new standard for hostage rescue takedown. And Operation Thunderbolt ended up having its name changed to Mivtza Yonatan, or Operation Yonatan, in Yoni Netanyahu's memory. Again, reshaped global response to terrorism. Remains the gold standard for hostage rescues. And those operations, as I said, still being taught to this day. Message was very clear. Israel does not negotiate with terrorists, and they will do whatever it takes to bring their people home. And the spirit of Entebbe lives on. Courage, sacrifice, defending what's right. And that legacy continues to inspire the Israeli special operations community to this day. It was an absolute monster and legend of an operation. I want to thank you guys for joining me on this one. This is one of the most extraordinary missions in modern history for hostage rescue, for counterterrorism. And if you enjoyed this analysis and you enjoyed this story, do me a favor. You can help support the show. Hit the link in the description of this video. Grab yourself a mini sponsorship package and become a sponsor. It helps me keep putting out episodes here. We're completely independently produced. Stay safe. Stay strong. Am Yisrael Chai. And just remember, there's no backwards in counterterrorism. And just like we're seeing our special operations units rescuing hostages in Gaza, the remaining hostages are being looked at very, very closely. It's at the forefront of Israel's military objectives. And I think you're going to see some more magic tricks get pulled off soon. Aaron Cohen here. Appreciate you guys. And I'll catch you guys soon on the next one.